Welcome to episode 657 of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard.
And I'm Richard Gunther, and this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and games. And Josh, we have a lot of feedback, so we should get into it, but how can people send us feedback?
I think all of this feedback this week came into our email inbox using the email address entertainment20 at thedigitalmediazone.com. But we're also live streaming tonight, and we have video. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you can leave us YouTube comments while you're also clicking buttons like the thumbs up and the subscribe button.
I saw what you did there. That was pretty clever. All right. Well, let's get into it. Our first message is from Mike, and Mike reached out and said, "Hey, Richard and Josh. Richard, you frequently talk about backing up your Blu-ray ultra high definition disc. Ultra H, that is what that stands for, right? Ultra high definition. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud before. Discs to your Plex server using your Mac OS machine. I frequently have issues where the OS will not even read the disc and immediately ejects it. It is a really old drive and happens mostly with newer discs. I presume some sort of copy protection. I am curious what blue drive you're using, and can you share the rest of your process? Backup software and encoding use, stuff like that." All right. So my answer, I already sent a message to Mike and appreciate the question. We haven't talked about this in a long time in terms of just the mechanics of this. So for my process, I'm using, and this has changed over the years because different devices have tended to be more reliable with newer discs over the years. I am now using a Liteon, Liteon EB1 portable Blu-ray drive. It's like the kind of thing that you would have for a laptop. It's one of those really small things that has a button that you press and it just manually kind of kicks out this drawer that's almost as big as the unit itself, which is only maybe, I don't know, like 1.5 to 2 disc cases thick. And it uses a USB cable to connect with my Mac. So that drive is capable of reading the Blu-ray UHD discs. And then I use Make MKV on the Mac to back up only the primary title. I generally don't worry about all of the other material. I'm not trying to get all of the director's commentary and all that stuff. And I mean, let's just be realistic about this, right? I tried to be that person for so many years and tried to get all that stuff. And come on, how often are you really going to watch that it makes it worth going through all the time to pull those out separately, name them properly for whatever software you're using to play the stuff on your TV? I found it not worth it. So I'm making this as simple as possible. I use Make MKVs to make MKVs. And that's it. That's all I do. I don't do any tweaking to the encoding. I select the main title. I let it automatically choose all the English subtitles, which it will do for you. And I save it out to my NAS. And that's it. I don't try to compress it. I don't want to compress it. I don't try to convert it to any other format. I am simply saving the extracted MKV that this software creates for you. And it's easy. It's slow sometimes. I mean, sometimes it may take as long as watching the movie to do that, but it works and it's fairly reliable as long as you wait a couple days after new discs come out, because you may remember that there's some, it's some sort of, trying to keep you from copying it going on. And it takes a while to get the proper codes out there in the world to be able to then still back it up for your own legal, legitimate purposes. We think it's legal. And that just comes into MKV automatically. You don't have to worry about it. If you have this program, it looks for the latest codes, but they're not always available the first day a brand new disc comes out. So that's the only real constraint there. Process works well for me. Josh, are you doing this at all anymore?
Very rarely. I don't buy disc very often anymore, and I don't have a UHD Blu-ray drive that's can be connected to a computer. So that's the biggest reason I'm not really doing it anymore. I used to rip Blu-rays. It was a very similar process. I would just use Make MKV and then store it on my Plex server. Like you, the whole reason I was ripping it was because I didn't want any compression. I just wanted easy access to my uncompressed movies on my Plex server. So pretty similar process. I just don't have an Ultra HD Blu-ray player to do that with. And, but like, unlike you, I don't have practically unlimited storage on my NAS. I have not, I've not done a lot of work to make my NAS enormous. So I would start to have issues if I were ripping UHD Blu-ray drives, Blu-ray disc.
Yeah. Nice. So Sharp Dress Penguin in the chat says that he uses a Linux machine with Make MKV in a container that auto rips anything that's popped in and ejects it when it's copied, and it's automatically dumped into his Plex media folder. Slick.
Yeah, that's a pretty sweet automated setup for sure.
Very nice. Yeah. My process is more manual,
but it's still not that like you click a couple of buttons in Make MKV, and when the file is done, you copy it to your NAS. It's not that complicated.
Well, and actually, I have it right out to the NAS, which is problematic because every once in a while, if there's a network hiccup that can cause some problems. But
yeah, and it's probably the biggest reason it takes so long for you.
Could be.
Yeah, if you were ripping straight to your SSD on your Mac, that ripping process would probably go faster. And then it's a one-time copy. Yeah.
Now I need to do an experiment.
Right. For science.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Our next message, thank you again, Mike. This next one is from Nathan. It's another question for Richard. Or really more of a correction for Richard, which I love. I love it when people have things to correct that Richard said.
Yeah, Buzz Out Loud called these well actuallys.
Right. He says, it isn't true that signing up for Paramount Plus through Apple TV channels does not get you access to the Paramount Plus app.
I like that you're doing the exasperated voice too, Josh.
Yeah. I'm sure that Nathan was far more polite. I'm intentionally trying to do this like my teenagers would say it to me. After signing up for Paramount Plus through the Apple TV app, just go to ParamountPlus.com/Apple to link your Apple and Paramount Plus accounts. You only need to do this once, and you'll have all the same features that signing up directly with Paramount Plus gets you, including live streams and downloads in the Paramount Plus app. One advantage of doing this is that Paramount Plus puts video ads for other Paramount Plus shows at the start of content watched through the Paramount Plus app. But the same content watched through Apple TV channels does not include those ads. So paying for Paramount Plus through Apple has one significant advantage and zero disadvantages. Richard, there is a disadvantage, right?
Well, for me there is, and the disadvantage is that I can't do that through my Walmart Plus subscription and get this discount that I'm getting.
Right.
So I'm paying a lot less, almost half the price, to be able to access Paramount Plus by subscribing through Walmart Plus. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I got it through Apple. I used to get it through Apple. Now, it's also worth noting that I used to do this. I used to have this set up and it just stopped working. And maybe what happened is it's something that only works for a year and then you have to set it up again after a period of time. But my login that I had created to Paramount Plus through this process stopped working. And I never got too deeply involved in figuring out why. I also, frankly, and I know this is an unpopular opinion, because when services say they're ad-free and then they play a promotion for another show on their service, I know that annoys a lot of people. It doesn't bother me. If anything, I'm glad to find out about other stuff that I might not have thought about that they think that I might be interested in. So I don't have a problem with that.
You heard it here first, folks. Richard loves ads.
That is not what I said.
That's what I heard.
Not what I said. All right. Well, anyway, thank you. I do appreciate the clarification, and you're right. It is possible. It stopped working and I just didn't bother exploring too much. All right. Next message is from Mark, and we're not going to read Mark's whole message because it is fairly long, but he does say he just wanted to send some words of encouragement to me to rip the Band-Aid off and put the dang Plex server on my beefy Mac Studio. And he shares a story where he had been doing it to a device that started to not have enough power. And so he's like, all right, well, maybe I'll put it on the Mac, and it ended up working fine, not really taking any CPU. In fact, he uses a great example where it took less CPU time than Gmail did running on the same computer. So fair enough. I think this is less a matter of me not wanting to use processor cycles on this machine and just wanting to have clean lines between what machine I use for what. Now, in all fairness, I also used to have a work laptop separate from my home desktop. And I blurred those lines a couple years ago, realizing that, it's just easier to sit at one computer and have access to everything. So maybe this isn't such a bad idea, and I might need to consider doing this. But I do want to get a little bit of time into figuring out why my Plex server can't decode these videos anymore when it used to be able to do it. So thank you very much. I appreciate your story, Mark, and your encouragement, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a bunch of great listener feedback. We really appreciate it. And it's fun being able to help each other out. And when you all help everybody else out with great feedback, like from Nathan. So thank you, everybody. Keep those coming in. The rest of our contact information will be available at the end of the show, or just head on over to thedigitalmediazone.com for the show notes, where you'll find all of our contact information and everything else that we talked about. So let's jump into the news this week. We'll start with some video news as usual. Richard, I have to be honest. This first story we're going to talk about, I thought, maybe people don't care about this. I'm not going to put it in the show. And then I started my morning, as I do every morning, with NPR's Up First podcast. They're 15-minute daily news podcast just to keep you updated on what's going on in the world. And they were talking about this story. And
I thought, which is fair enough.
If NPR is talking about this,
we should talk about it.
Probably worth it for this show. So what the heck am I talking about here? I am talking about the feud, the battle to the death between DirecTV.
Again.
Well, last year was Charter. This time it's DirecTV. And Disney / ABC / ESPN, all of those conglomerates all grouped together in one. What do we call them? Is it just Disney? Do we just call them
Disney? I mean, okay. Disney owns all of this, right?
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Disney, but they own ESPN and ABC and National Geographic and all that sort of stuff. So what's actually going on? Well, this weekend, when many people were watching college football, maybe because that just started, or maybe we're watching the US Open, or maybe just watching ESPN and all of their coverage of things because the NFL season is about to start. Well, anybody who was trying to do that on DirecTV suddenly started getting error screens because you can't watch any of those channels on DirecTV right now because DirecTV and Disney don't exactly see eye to eye on what DirecTV should be paying to have all of that content on their service. And this applies to both satellite customers and the DirecTV streaming customers.
Right. So can we just kind of phrase that in a way that helps establish that DirecTV, or at the end of their current agreement with Disney. So it's not like just because all this stuff is on now, Disney's strong-arming them and not showing stuff. Their contract ended and they were unable to reach an agreement prior to the end of that contract.
Right. Although I do wonder if the timing of the contract was strategically placed.
I mean, maybe, but who put it there? Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
But that's fair. That's fair. So at the root of this, the issue that they're fighting over is DirecTV doesn't want to do things the way that these linear TV streaming or non-streaming even providers have been making arrangements with content providers for literally decades. The way that it's pretty much always worked is the big guys like Disney come in and they say, you can have access to all of our content or to none of our content. And to have access to all of it, it's going to cost you this much. And for somebody like Disney, it's a whole lot because it includes ESPN and Disney. Like those are the main reasons, right?
Well, ESPN specifically is probably the most expensive of the services that anyone is paying for.
Right. And what DirecTV is saying is, okay, that was fine for maybe the past 30 years, but it doesn't make sense nowadays. In a world where people can stream so much of this stuff and can really use streaming platforms and things like that to really only be paying for the content they want, we don't feel like we should be forcing our customers to pay for content they don't want. If we have subscribers who don't have children, why should they pay for Disney Junior? If we have subscribers who don't care about sports, why should they have to pay for ESPN? And I mean, that's basically what people have been complaining about with cable TV for literally decades.
Yep.
And so DirecTV feels like they have some solid ground to make that case.
Again, because, nobody's ever made that case before in the last 40 years.
Right. But it's a little bit more realistic now to be making that case, right? Because there are ways to do almost this, right? And DirecTV is basically saying, we don't care. Like, we're not changing the model.
No, Disney is saying we don't care.
Sorry, Disney is saying we don't care. We went through all of this with Charter last year. They stuck to the old model. You're going to stick to the old model too.
Yep. So, okay, Tom, I'm going to play the role of Brian and be the devil's advocate in this conversation. Because, and this is not going to be the first time this happens tonight, I'm going to defend Disney, and everyone knows I'm a Disney fanboy. Disney recognizes that the business model that supports the content that they provide doesn't allow for picking and choosing, doesn't allow for a la carte, which is what all of these providers like Charter and like DirecTV and like everyone else have been trying to provide, because that's what their customers are asking for. Their customers want to be able to say, I want this channel, but not that channel. The economics, the reality of the economics is that even though you're basically paying about $5 a month for ESPN, because that was the latest figure that we had on that. It's probably even more expensive now. That subsidizes content that people aren't going to pay for on its own, but still enjoy. So let's say, for example, the Disney Kids channel that you mentioned earlier. That's fun, interesting, sometimes educational and family-friendly content that Disney makes available, that if you just offered that in and of itself, probably would never get enough subscribers to survive for what they could charge for it. So the way that Disney makes money on these things is they charge a package fee for all of this stuff and then spread the money around based on viewership and advertising and everything else. So that's why the business model is the way it is. And I understand that that's not what people want, but I've also worked as a consultant for a cable company in the past, and I understand the economics of it.
And I can't really argue against that. Like, that is how some of these channels do survive and exist at all. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we move to this, it's very likely that we would lose some long tail content that otherwise would never get sufficient funding.
That's true, but there's also the argument could be made that if the content is good enough, then it ought to be able to live, to stand on its own. Right? I mean, Sci-Fi Network's still around, for God's sakes. Like,
tell that to GigaOM. I mean, I think it's possible to produce quality content and not overspend on it, but not be able to make enough money to keep it viable. And that's what this business model allows. So I don't have a problem with this. I have never been, and so that's where I'm also kind of against the grain here. I've never been one that said, oh, well, I don't want this channel, so I don't want to pay for it. Because I think that's just like, okay, whatever. Open your mind a little bit.
Especially when you could make that argument in the strongest possible case because you do not care about ESPN.
I don't care about ESPN.
You don't care about the most expensive one that you're paying for. Right. But you do. So, like, I agree. It does allow us to get access to some things that might not otherwise exist. But it can it's also hard to be on that same side when Disney, frankly, just feels like the bully on the playground right now, between things like this and now the lawsuit that we talked about last week, where, you know, their participation in the venue sports agreement also has them getting sued by the federal government for anti-competitive practices. Like, they seem like they're taking their size and pushing other people around to prop up their business, right?
I almost feel like the venue thing is the opposite side of the coin, because they're playing by participating with other providers in a larger service that aggregates things that people want to get together.
Right, but they're doing it at the expense of companies like DirecTV and Charter and Fubo and YouTube TV, because they don't.
Because they're providing competition?
Yes. I'm with you on all of this, really. Like, I want the competition that venue sports brings to the equation, as long as they're not abusing their monopolistic powers to charge exorbitant contract rates to the DirecTVs and Fubos of the world. I'm all for competition. I love competition. I think it's great. And while I can certainly understand the complaint about not wanting to pay for channels that you don't care about, the business model has largely worked. Like we for sure have people screaming at their phones right now, saying, "Yeah, but paying for content that you care about, we've never seen that work better than we have over the last 10 years. Like Patreon doesn't exist without this model." And, kind of like one-off streaming services and stuff. Like, there's services that are just for anime, and you can pay for just an MLB subscription if you want. And like that is all working nowadays. So there's plenty of arguments to be made in the other direction.
Yes. And we're also seeing a consolidation of services because the small services couldn't make it work on their own. And that's why we have something like Peacock. And that's why we have something like Max that aggregates all of these different things that couldn't make it on their own. So I do think that the business is proving out that we need, it's kind of like what we argue against when companies buy each other out. Oh, there's less competition there. Yeah, but if that didn't happen, one or both of those companies might have gone under because they're not big enough to survive against everyone else.
Yeah.
So I just think it's the reality of the business right now. But
I think it is too. And I think the problem really lies in the middle. Like the really big guys, the NBCs, the Disneys of the world, they've got enough to make this work.
Yep.
The little guys who are out there with just completely independent Patreons around their YouTube shows or their podcasts and stuff, they can do it. But it's the middle guys that they're the ones struggling to make enough money to keep it going.
Yeah.
And that's where the consolidation is happening.
Right. Exactly. All right. That's the end of me channeling Brian Brushwood for tonight.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next topic, which I think is just pure joy. We don't have to fight about this one, I don't think. I'm not even sure we were fighting on the last one. We basically agree. So, right. Like it sucks. The situation sucks, but we basically agree about the business models. So let's move on to happier news that's still about ESPN. And it's a new feature from ESPN that is making it a whole lot easier for you to find whatever sports it is that you want to watch, even if it's not on ESPN, because holy crap, keeping track of where the sports are that you want to watch right now is really only becoming more and more difficult. Like there's a lot of great options out there, but even if you just pick a sport or even just a team in one particular sport, you probably, if you want to watch every game or match or whatever your particular sport calls it, you probably need access to multiple services just to be able to do that. And so ESPN, recognizing this problem, has added a new feature to their website and to their app called Where to Watch. You, from the app or from the website, there's a little icon in the header. It looks like a TV with a bulleted list on the screen. It's supposed to look like a TV guide, but it looks like a bulleted list. And you click that and it takes you to a page that is just a giant list of, I'm not going to say all of the sports, but effectively all of the sports that you could be watching right now. It shows you which ones are live. If you've selected sports or teams that you care the most about, they're, automatically sorted at the top. And then it just shows you what are all of the different services where you can watch that thing. And it's not just like, oh, well, this is on ESPN. That's it. Like it's a bunch of different services. If it's on SEC TV or ACC TV, or if it's on Bally Sports, RSNs, they're all in there. If it's an NFL game on Amazon Prime, it's in there. Does it have every single service out there? Probably not. But does it have the vast majority of them? Yeah, it does. And it makes finding what you want to watch so much easier. And if you're like, okay, but there's like 1,000 sports on at a time, you can filter it by the sport you want to watch. Okay, but I don't want to have to see I just want to watch some sports, but I don't have all of these other services. I don't have the ACC network. Okay, you can filter it by the services that you do have. Like, it's got pretty much everything you could be looking for.
Nice.
And it's free. Like, it's just a feature in the ESPN app. Is there any downside here, Richard?
Well, I don't know if there's a downside, but I would ask, does it actually link to stuff that's not on ESPN, or is it just informational?
Apparently some of it does link, but it doesn't work with every service out there.
And that may be more on the services delivering that content than anything else. If they're actually doing that with some, then it suggests that they're trying to be fairly open about it. I mean, this is kind of awesome. This is not dissimilar from what the TV content aggregators are doing now, like Google and Apple and others, Roku as another example, that have their own content and offer their own channels for getting content, but also link you out to where you can find everything else if you want to look at something else. So I think this is a great idea.
Yep, absolutely love this. We'll definitely be using this pretty regularly, especially for college football, because college football is all over the place.
Yeah, for real. All right, so the next one is an audio story, and it's Apple related. So I'm assuming you expect me to cover it.
I don't know. It's saying bad things about Apple. Did you want to cover that?
I'm going to take a different perspective on it.
Oh boy, we may be back to fighting again.
All right. So recently, if you're a Spotify user, you probably realize that if you use Spotify Connect to play your Spotify content on devices other than your phone itself, that from your iPhone or from your iPad, you can no longer use the volume buttons on those specific devices to control the volume of what you're listening to through Spotify Connect. And that used to somewhat reliably work. Initially, it worked great. It was awesome. It's kind of like what you could do with Sonos and a bunch of other systems that have done similar things over the years. But then Apple started making it a little bit less reliable. I don't know if that's a proper way of stating that, but it seemed as though it was less reliable more recently. And then now it just doesn't work at all. Well, Apple has officially removed the ability for third-party apps to use their volume buttons to control the volume of other devices. Unless, and this is the part that the article that we are linking to doesn't get into, unless your app will work with the HomePod and send content to the HomePod using the API that they have designed for that purpose. So if you are basically a made for HomePod, if that's the right term, app, and you get Apple's okay on your implementation of that, then you're allowed to do this. That's a little suspicious. That sounds a little like, what's that term we learned a couple years ago? Quid pro quo? I'll let you do this if you let me. Yeah. It's a little suspicious, but this is what's happening. So basically, Apple has taken this capability away that everybody used to be able to use. And it's a really nice feature, because if you can't do it, it means that you have to go into the app and you have to use the app's volume adjuster to change the volume of what you're listening to. And that's kind of stupid, right? Like, why do that? If you have volume buttons on the device, you should be able to use those volume buttons for said purpose. You can, but you have to play by Apple's rules. Surprise, that's so Apple, right? It's just so Apple.
It is so Apple, but even worse than average Apple. Like you understand, like everyone expects Apple to optimize things if you're going to be entirely in the Apple ecosystem. The it just works mindset, like it applies to you've got everything in the Apple ecosystem. And when you've start to stretch the bounds of that, then things aren't necessarily it just works. TM. But this is ridiculous. Like, no one wants to use on-screen volume controls that probably aren't standardly implemented across apps and all of that.
Right, exactly.
Partly because who gives a crap? Because no one's going to use them, right? Like, everyone is going to use the buttons they have on the side of the phone. And it's BS. Like how this is so dumb for them to go and do this and make it so that it only works if you're controlling something that's playing to your HomePod.
Yeah. I can't argue with you. It's not that it only works if it's playing to the HomePod, but you have to be a player in that ecosystem to get this capability. But still, it's Yep.
Unacceptable.
It's obnoxious.
And just to double check, as I was writing up the notes for this story tonight, I pulled out my Google Pixel, opened up the Spotify app there, opened up Spotify on my Windows desktop, started playing some music there, and lo and behold, I was able to adjust the volume on my computer from the volume buttons on my Google Pixel.
Oh yeah, totally. You can totally do that.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure.
You can totally do that.
This is still a thing in other ecosystems.
Yep.
It's just that Apple sucks.
Okay, I'm not going to go that far, but it's just that Apple has their own rules. Yes.
Yeah.
You know what's funny?
Crappy rules.
Is that there are times when I'm listening to stuff on my HomePod and I don't have my phone nearby, but there's an Apple TV remote sitting right there. And that Apple TV remote, I'll bet, and that HomePod have chips in them that let them know that they're in each other's proximity. But I can't pick up that remote and adjust the volume or play or pause, even though my TV isn't on, but my HomePod is in that very room. So they're not even using their own capabilities to their own best advantage. But they're like, bent on ensuring that third parties have to use their tools the way they want them to.
Yeah. Not cool. Okay. So can we move on to the thing that I'm the most excited about?
All right. This is where you become a fanboy. Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. I don't know. Am I a fanboy if I've never actually owned a single device from this company? Okay, so we're talking about Razer, the company that makes gaming-focused devices. I was going to say peripherals, but they also make laptops and stuff. So it's way more than just peripherals. But they have a new version of their Xbox controller. It is the Razer Wolverine V3. There's actually two versions here. There's the V3 Pro and the V3 Tournament. Most of the things we're going to talk about are shared between the two controllers, so we'll get into what separates the two later. Let's talk about all of the amazing things that are in this third version of the Razer Wolverine controller. First off, and maybe most importantly, the thumbsticks are Hall effect sensors. You've heard me talk about them in the past. I think I predicted going into this year that we would see way more controllers with Hall effect thumbsticks, and here is yet another one. Why are these so important? Because they don't drift. Every controller made by Sony, made by Xbox, and made by Nintendo directly, they all experience stick drift, even the really expensive Xbox Elite controllers. They all eventually suffer from this.
For those of us who are unfamiliar, can you just again touch on what stick drift is?
Stick drift, like let's say you take your hands off the thumbstick it will perceive that you are moving the stick in one direction. So, it's unwanted input when you're not doing things.
Yep.
Yeah. Can be a very major problem depending on the type of game you're playing. So that's a huge deal. And then the rest of this is like basically taking the Pro controller type functionality and taking it to the next level. So it has 4 paddles on the back of the controller that you can easily reach with your fingers. But they're using what they're calling them mouse click paddles because they're using the same technology that Razer puts in their gaming mice, which means they've got a super satisfying click sound and they're very responsive. So there's not going to be a big delay. They don't require a huge physical movement to press them in. You can very
It sounds
quickly,
like a really short throw, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A really short throw, really satisfying short throw. They also have 2, they call them claw grip bumpers that are next to the RB and LB bumpers. I guess that's for a weird way of holding the controller. I don't that seems weird, but they're completely customizable. Just like the bumpers or the buttons on the back, you can map them to any other button on the controller. The actual triggers, there are physical toggles that physically change the depth, like how far you have to push the triggers in for them to be activated. So in a shooter like Call of Duty or something like that, you don't want to have to pull that trigger all the way in because that takes longer. So this shortens the throw on it, making it even faster for you to pull those triggers. Or you flip the toggle the other way and it works like a normal trigger where it's completely analog all throughout the length of the pull. And then the other really cool thing for like the really advanced like esports players, if you plug either of these controllers into a PC, you can crank up the polling rate to 1,000 hertz polling. That means 1,000 times per second it can detect you pushing a button or moving a thumbstick, which is crazy fast. Crazy fast.
That's a millisecond, literally, right?
Yeah, it is. Right. Which you're not moving that fast, but it just basically means it won't miss anything that you're doing. So both versions of this controller have all of those features. What really sets the V3 Pro apart from the V3 Tournament, really the main thing is the V3 Pro is wireless and the Tournament is wired. The wireless, it's not using the Xbox wireless protocol. It's using a 2.4 gigahertz USB dongle. I don't know.
Is that good or bad?
I find it a little bit annoying.
Heavy sigh.
Well, so last week we were talking about a headset that I really liked, right?
Yeah.
But it has not 1, but 2 dongles. And so, like, if you want that headset and you want this controller, now you've got to have 2 dongles plugged into your Xbox. And there's only 1 on the front of your Xbox. So if you need to have shorter or less interference, you don't want the Xbox itself causing interference because the dongle's plugged into the back of it or something, that can start to become problematic, I guess. Like, I mean, you can use a USB hub on your Xbox, but that feels a little ridiculous. So I don't know. It's probably for the best. Like their wireless dongle is probably more performant than the Xbox wireless protocol, but I don't know for sure.
All right, now I want to know if any of our listeners have a USB hub on their Xbox. We need to know. Let us know. Send us feedback.
I guarantee it. Because like if you've got keyboard and mouse and maybe a USB hard drive, like there's for sure got to be people that are listening to the show that have USB hubs.
Let us know.
Yeah. So that's not the only difference. The V3 Pro, you can also swap out the thumbstick caps. Like you can get concave or convex, short versus tall, which have different advantages based on the type of game you're playing. The haptics are more advanced in the V3 Pro, and they're customizable. You can customize how much that controller is shaking. It also has RGB lights, but it's because it's Razer, like it has to have RGB lights.
Well, right. I mean, there isn't an RGB light setup in every single one of the. I mean, I'm shocked
pretty much
that
every
this is unique to this.
Right. But even on this controller, it's pretty scaled back. It is only the Razer logo on the top of the controller. That's the only thing that lights up. Very, very subdued for Razer. And then it also has a carrying case, which is nice. And like I said, it's wireless. So that controller, $200. Now, for a lot of people, they're going to be like, what are you talking? $200 for a controller? But that's not really that much more expensive than, and frankly, it's less expensive than some of the competitors, but it's only like $20 more than the Xbox Elite controller. And frankly, it's probably higher quality. People are always complaining about those things breaking, and they have stick drift, and this one won't. But if $200 is just too much for you to pay, and maybe you don't care about swapping out the thumbsticks, which I wouldn't, you can get the V3 Tournament. It's wired, but it's $100 instead of $200. And the only other difference is you have to wait a little bit longer because the V3 Pro is available now. The V3 Tournament will be available September 25th.
But what about those sweet, sweet LEDs?
The bigger problem is like, am I willing to run a 10-foot USB cable across my living room while playing
for
Call
sure.
of Duty?
Right.
To save $100, I might be willing to have a long cable going across the house.
I don't know. I sense another device on your wish list.
Man, this show is getting expensive for my gaming habits. But I really like the idea of this controller. I've always been on the fence about the Xbox Elite controllers, and I've never actually purchased one. This one has me very strongly considering getting one. Because I suck at Call of Duty. I could use all the help I can get. And those triggers would be really nice. Being able to map things like run to those paddles on the back would make gaming more comfortable, because pressing in on the thumbsticks for run and things like that are like, it eventually starts to get uncomfortable in your hands. So like, this feels like an investment in my physical health, Richard.
Your physical health, and from what you said, is going to make you a better gamer.
Exactly.
I mean, you have to have it.
I have to do it at this point, right? I'll just I'll send Jen the link to this podcast, and that should be all the.
She'll hear your argument, and
right?
she'll completely understand.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
So anybody who needs to send this to their partner, here's your doctor's note, your permission slip. All right, well, that is it for our news this week. Let's jump into what's going on in our entertainment centers.
All right, so everybody knows, watching Big Brother this season's been so good. The last eviction was, wow, it was great, frustrating but great, and I think the season has been so good. So I continue to watch that and stay up on that. I got back to watching Abbott Elementary, the season 3. I had kind of lost steam in the middle of that. And this weekend I went away. So I had lots of time on airplanes because I went to the West Coast. And that was one of the things that I watched. So really enjoyed that. Definitely worth a watch if you've enjoyed that show. Also, getting back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't know if this is actually considered part of the Cinematic Universe, but in the Marvel timeline, the next series that I would watch if I were watching everything in chronological order would be the Jessica Jones season 2. And I never did get going on that. So started that, and that looks like it's going to be really good. So I'm excited about that. I also, speaking, the reference that we made earlier to Brian and Tom was with regard to cord killers. And one of the things they do these days is called the full experience. The full experience is about watching the first, the ultimate, meaning highest rated, the lowest rated, and the last episode of a given series. And they did that several months ago, I guess it was, for Battlestar Galactica. Josh, you and I loved Battlestar Galactica. It's one of my top 5 favorite TV series ever. And I was all in on revisiting the show that I love just by doing these little touch points and reminding myself how amazing the show was, because even the lowest rated episode was great. Had a good time watching those 4 episodes and then listening to the commentary from Brian, Tom, and Amos on all 4 of those episodes. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I don't always listen to the full experience from the Cord Killers guys, but I did at least listen to those episodes because, like you, it is for sure at least top 5 for me, if not top 1 or 2 for me. But I didn't go back and watch the episodes. I kind of wish I would have.
Yeah, it was so good. I'm so glad that I did. And I caught stuff that I didn't remember from the first time or that I didn't even catch the first time. So that was cool. Like, I understood the weird ending that they did better than I did the first time that I watched it, because I never watched it more than one time. So,
right.
And so,
doing this experience with Battlestar Galactica, this is like, it seems like a small commitment, but it's not, because that first episode is like a 2-hour miniseries.
No.
Right?
The first episode is the pilot of the series, and it throws you right in after the miniseries happened. So you already know all of this stuff. And if you didn't remember that, then you're thrown into an hour of story that's already started like 4 hours ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's that. So I don't know that I'd recommend this if you don't know anything about this, but man, this was so much fun. And the surreal thing was that I was just away on the West Coast this weekend. And one of the reasons that I was away was to connect with some friends of mine, among whom are Amos, aka Anthony, who is the producer of Cord Killers and was one of the people giving updates. So I was joking with him in text from the flight saying, I'm doing the full experience from Battlestar Galactica, listening to you guys after each episode. Really weird since I just saw you. So, all right. Also been watching Snowpiercer, and I have an episode behind that I missed on that this weekend. So I'm hoping to watch that tonight. Been watching more episodes of Orphan Black Echoes and enjoying that. Started a series that I didn't know anything about called Chaos on Netflix. It's essentially the story of the Greek gods as if they were our gods now in our world today. And how would that interaction work? And it's really kind of funny because Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus. So it's a weird and entertaining take on this old mythology with new stories and characters that you know, maybe if you know the history or the mythology of these characters. And I'm enjoying it. And the music in the series is phenomenal. It's really, really good. So this is something I would recommend. A friend of ours turned us onto this, and I would suggest checking it out if it sounds interesting. Also, and I thank the folks at Marketplace for this. On Make Me Smart, they were talking about the Paralympics quite a lot. And I generally have not gotten into watching the Paralympics, and I've just put it on to have in the background a number of times over the last week or so. And one of the things that really interested me was a game called Wheelchair Rugby, where they're playing rugby in wheelchairs. And I don't know if you caught this in any of the vernacular, Josh, but do you know what the nickname for this game is?
No.
It's known affectionately as Murder Ball.
Oh, that is amazing.
Because basically they just try and knock each other over on their wheelchairs while they're carrying the ball across the field. It is so friggin' cool. And I had such a good time watching the final game between Japan and the US. Unfortunately, we took silver. Japan won the final game, but wow, this is a really cool thing to watch. And I've really been impressed by everything I've seen there so far. And then finally, I'm continuing to listen to the audiobook On Call. I mentioned this before. This is Tony Fauci's book about his life and experiences. And I'm up to roughly the response from the CDC and NIH to 9/11. Which is something that I hadn't even thought about. Like, it didn't even occur to me that, of course, that was a big part of his career and his life. And I do kind of remember him being the voice of the government through a lot of concerns about bioattacks and stuff like that. So really intriguing and enjoying that. All right, Josh, that's me. What's going on in your entertainment center?
All right. Well, we'll start with gaming. The only new thing, and actually maybe the only thing that I played last week, because it was a very busy week and weekend, which had me out of the house most of the time. But Friday night made time to play the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 beta that was available to anybody with Xbox Game Pass. You didn't have to pre-order the game ahead of time to get it if you were a Game Pass subscriber. I loved it. It's great. Like, I kind of go a little bit back and forth on Call of Duty at times, and I think what I've realized is I just like Black Ops the most. Like, I've just genuinely liked the Black Ops games even more than the Modern Warfare games. Like, Modern Warfare is what brought me to Call of Duty back on the Xbox 360. But it turns out the guys at Treyarch making Black Ops, I don't know, like, I can't even really describe to you what's different about the games, but it works better for me. I don't know why. I do better when I play Black Ops. It doesn't make sense to me, but I just enjoy it more than even the Modern Warfare games. So very excited for that to be the Call of Duty that is coming out this year, and even more excited that I won't have to pay extra for it because it'll be in Xbox Game Pass. In terms of TV, we're watching more Designated Survivor. We are about halfway through season 2 at this point. The really big event that happened just happened last night when we were watching, and wow, that's all I'll say. Wow. Yeah, it was crazy. Cool. Yeah, so still continue to love that show. Season 2, it's still not as good as season 1, but it's still very, very good, keeping our attention, and it won't be long until we're done because we're watching a lot of it when we do sit down to watch it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, season 3 is kind of abbreviated, so...
Yeah, it's only like 10 episodes or something. Yeah. All right, and then no movies this week. For books, I had mentioned last week that I had started Clear and Present Danger by Tom Clancy, but I switched because for a book club I'm in at work, we are reading The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and that is coming up in a couple of weeks, so I wanted to make sure that I had time to read it, although it's like a 12-hour book instead of 30 or whatever Clear and Present Danger is, so it's not like I wasn't going to have time to read it. This book is really fun. Like, it almost reads like a kid's book. It reminds me a lot of like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Like, that's what I think of as I'm reading this book. It starts with some characters who are just rude and all of that, but you can tell there's some goofiness to the world, and the goofiness really continues, and there's a lot of charm. You'll grow to love some of the characters. It's really interesting. It's about an inspector who works for the government department that ensures that magical youth who are in orphanages are being well cared for. In theory, that's what they're supposed to be doing. And the main character is one of the inspectors, and he gets asked to go to a very interesting house full of magical youth. And it's a really charming book. I've read so much dystopian and post-apocalyptic stuff. This is a very nice welcome change, and I highly recommend this book.
And a very different kind of book than Clear and Present Danger, but now you're never going to get that done before you have to return it.
No, that is the problem. I'm for sure going to get halfway through it before I have to return it and then wait another 5 weeks or whatever to get it back on the hold. Why does a 30-year-old Tom Clancy book have so many people wanting to read it right now? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, and I'm pretty sure that's it for what's going on in my entertainment center. So let's give people their ways to get a hold of us and then get out of here. So we're on social media. I'm at Josh Pollard on Twitter and Mastodon, although very, very rare. Like, I'm not on either all that often, but I'm even less present on Mastodon. But that's the only place you can find Richard, and he's at Richard Gunther over on Mastodon. The DMZ is just on Twitter still, at DigiMediaZone. You can email us, entertainment20@thedigitalmediazone.com, leave comments on the webpage, use the contact form on the webpage to email us, or hopefully, if you're still watching this on YouTube, you can leave comments over there after you've clicked that subscribe button, please and thank you. And then, we're finally doing the show live again. And so as long as schedules and technology continue to allow us to do that, we will be back typically Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. But that's going to do it for episode 657. He's Richard Gunther, and I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0. Adios.
Bye.